There are many kinds of love and many ways to use that word. It could be a noun or a verb. I searched Google, adverbs for love, and I got 46 options. None of them was the word liberating. Yet the most impactful, genuine of loves, I believe, are the ones that are liberating. Think of a healthy parent-child relationship. Talk about courage. It's all about the difficulty and joyful process of letting go, inch by inch by inch, all the way to self-care and responsibility. It's tough on everybody sometimes. Take a deep breath with me today. You seem in such good spaces as a community. Is that the breath out? Let's talk more about this word, liberating. You remember last month I talked to you about stewardship and the way that stewardship is deeper and more demanding than generosity. Well, adding the word liberating to love is a little like that, demanding. It can be uncomfortable to contemplate it because it requires greater self-discipline and greater intention. It's a spiritual practice that often costs us something, at the very least, bravery. A bravery that believes in right relationship in broad ways. I appreciate Sheila's reflection today in the Compass Rose, where she originally wrote part of it. She bravely discloses what all of us feel sometimes, that we just might not be lovable, might not be enough. And today she shared some practices of self-love, a love that can liberate us, that can help set us free from that, from those debilitating thoughts. What it costs for us to find right relationship with ourselves is surrendering the illusion that we can earn our lovability, when spiritual love is not earned at all. And we sang about that today in the song by Reverend Rebecca Parker and Elizabeth Norton, There is Love. There is love. There is love. And I believe it's a love that's intended to liberate us to be freely ourselves, flaws and all. I believe in a love that urges us to right relationship when we're working alongside of others. A love that doesn't hold others back from realizing the same kinds of yearnings most of us have in community. To be seen, to be loved, to be welcome. I believe in a liberating love that's even more than that. A powerful tool of spiritual community, a way to conduct our affairs inside and outside these walls. So what gets in the way? Well, we all do. I was thinking this week about an author named Neil Douglas Klotz, and he wrote a book called Prayers of the Cosmos, and actually several others. And he looks at scriptures from a variety of sources, but in Prayers of the Cosmos, he looks at the prayer that Jesus taught us. Some people call it the Lord's Prayer, but I think that's very sexist. And there's a phrase in that prayer that says, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, or forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And he studies these things from the Aramaic, which is the birth language of Jesus. If you speak a foreign language, you know that translation after translation to translation can kind of screw up how we understand stuff. So Klotz says one reasonable translation of that sentence is, untangle the knots within us so we can mend our hearts and repair the simple ties we have with others. So in the original Aramaic, it's about entanglements, unhealthy entanglements. And I assert that this echoes Buddhism, most certainly, in particular the metta meditation, with the power to help us untangle. And many atheist writers, too, point out that community is interconnected, and being in right relationship with others is in some way an organizing principle, even vital as a survival instinct, and we shouldn't require a God to understand that. Your Burning Bowl service, which you did just a few years ago, is in part about this kind of untangling, releasing ties to something that's holding us back from being the best version of ourselves, at least in this moment, because we're never finished. Liberating love. Sometimes it's a hard kind of letting go that you do for yourself, the ending of a chapter, a new beginning. And I don't know about you, but I do those several times a year. You're all connected to each other in different ways today. So take your piece of yarn, find it. If you don't have a piece of yarn, wave your hand and an usher will find you one. Piece of yarn, hold it in your hand for a minute. If you're comfortable, offer one end of that string to somebody else near you and they can hold on to it. Maybe your strings go both ways or one way or whatever. Go ahead and do that. So part of what I'm talking about today, is this confusing? It is, isn't it? So one of the things I'm talking about today is these linkages we have between ourselves and others in community in broad and small ways. So the thread today represents human connection. And you can put down your strings so you can pay attention. I know you're very entertained. So this yarn represents human connection. And these strings of human connection can be softly held or firmly held. And there might be thin little threads, or there might be really thick ropes. They could be thin or wide frayed. They can be super short or super long. We could go on and on and on. You know what I'm saying, right? So reflect a moment about where this string might represent connections you have in your day-to-day life, in this community, in other places. Now, as we sort of experienced already, sometimes when we have these connections out in the world, we can get tangled up. Sometimes in unhealthy ways. We do it inwardly. We do it in small and huge groups of humans. Whole nations do it sometimes, get tangled up. And if I ask you to hold tightly to your strings, close your eyes and wander about a minute, not only would you bump into each other, but we would get our strings all tangled. Right? Anybody ever try to untie a big bunch of yarn? Yeah, you'll know what happens. One can't intentionally pull one section without affecting other sections. We are currently in a really tangled up period in the United States. It is an impossible knot at this point. There's propaganda from so many sources urging us to entrench our rage. It's as if they're shouting, whatever you do not try to untangle. There's no legitimate way. It can't be done. It teaches us that it's dangerous to even attempt to understand the other. And no proponent of any other view feels seen or heard except in their own camp. And there's a little interest in listening and a deep interest in winning. It's a tangle. When Martin Luther King Jr. began his efforts to untangle the United States from a system that insisted some labor was worth less than other labor and pointed out the injustice of it all, when he attempted to preach a liberating love meant to free everyone, it frees the oppressor and the oppressed, from an injustice, an injustice that we now readily recognize was a worthy cause, he was killed for it. And he's not the only one. Liberating love can be dangerous. It costs us something. Harvey Milk lost his life for liberating love. Many practitioners of universalism and Unitarianism lost their lives for love. Love that seeks to entangle. That seems big, doesn't it? I want to start out a little big. I hope that none of our lives will be required of us in the years to come as a great untangling unfolds and must unfold. But I believe in love, and so I believe a great untangling will be required of us. And I believe that when the time comes, there will be those who have practiced for such a time as this, even if they don't know who they are yet. Great things rise up in very surprising places. And we'll all decide how and when to participate in that. But here's the thing for us, in this particular time and place in this room, spiritual practice requires practice. So that we're ready. So when we have an opportunity to share in the work of liberating love, we'll have some practice. Just this week, I was in 2 conversations on different UUSM threads, email threads, going back and forth. And as I observed and watched, it occurred to me that they were all in a very friendly kind of tangle that boiled down to the idea of whose responsibility was it and whose authority was it. But however are we going to decide? How do we practice a liberating love? How do we set ourselves up for less tangle and easier harmony? We might call this developing deeper right relationships in groups. And it could be more than just resolving conflicts. We need boundaries too. Guidelines that set us free, and they can do that. Over the next several months, we're going to explore together how this might look, talk together about what we each need or might need to be a little more efficient. Now don't forget, don't misunderstand me, you all are amazing. You really are truly amazing. But there is no perfect person or place, no perfect system that doesn't need to change, no institution that can't reach for more success, more outreach, and more connection. And I don't think that there is any other denomination of spiritual people that is better equipped to operate in what is becoming a more and more pluralizing world. We should be ready. I've been thinking about the departure of your last pastor. Now, there are times when situations arise that need to be discussed with others outside any decision or conflict, for safety's sake perhaps, or to seek safe counsel. But if we do that in less healthy ways, we create a lot of strings. Pretty soon, we have not just knots, but not on the edges, but right in the middle, big knots. When Ben left, a knot developed among your community members because it was just too big to carry one story in your group as it grows larger. I heard 4 different stories. All of them, I'm sure, were partially true about that time. And Reverend Tobus are aware that there's still a bit of a tangle about this and some other past relationships with clergy. How will we untangle and free ourselves, liberate ourselves in love? That's going to be part of our transition work. We don't want your new pastor to get all tangled up in untangled balls of hurt that in no way relate to them. Are you with me?
Yes.
And this does happen. Times when we hold a string of relationship with another that sometimes the other doesn't even know about. Like a projection of our pain that no way relates to them. Or, a secret crush. Other times we're aware of a tension that is something unresolved. And as individuals, we know here that right relationship probably involves a discussion with a person who we find ourselves tied, energetically linked in a kind of disagreement or hard place. A conversation, this is also a conversation that can happen when we're aware that we may have harmed someone or impacted someone in a negative way. Like the AA program teaches of the 9th step. We make direct amends to those we've hurt, except when to do so might injure them or others. Liberating love can listen. Liberating love can reflect. Liberating love can weather a continuing disagreement, but without rancor. We can learn from each other, respect each other enough to learn more. It takes practice and it takes courage. And there are other times when ties are better held at a distance for everyone's sake, even for love's sake. And I don't think this should ever be our first choice. And sometimes, for many good reasons, it may still be the best choice to allow love to do its work in the hands of another. When I worked at a church in San Francisco, I led a program that served meals twice a week to hungry people. Some were on SSI, some were underemployed, some were without permanent shelter. All had experienced shame for their need, externally or internally, both. I taught our workers that a large part of our spiritual work was to simply see them as worthy of care, so they could escape some of the self-loathing. Give them space to experience our love, and then maybe self-love that leads to all kinds of healing sometimes. I've seen it myself. Every once in a while, those who shared our meals would come to church. And there was always a few regulars in the congregation who would approach me with concerns and objections, asking usually, couldn't I get this one or that one to go shower? You know them, please. I would tell them our job is greeting everyone in our midst with welcome, but it was okay if they couldn't manage that. It might be another's gift to meet the need. And it was a need. Liberating love, a love that might make someone who feels unwelcome all day long welcome for an hour and loved. In essence, I said, untie yourself. Go to another part of the room. Send love from a distance. It's okay. Here's another example. When congregants used to come to me, don't come to me now, that's Tovis's job. When congregants used to come to me about particular issues in their past, something in the way back that they yearn to resolve, sometimes active listening does set people free, confessions of the heart. But other times it's deeper. And for those folks, eventually I would come to talk about this string and explore the fact that sometimes in our lives, the only one holding onto a string of our hurt is ourselves. The other person has completely let it go or isn't willing to engage it at all. Then I always recommend a professional therapist to help them with their thinking. Therapists are good. In any conflict, large or small, complicated or uncomplicated, we have choices. Sometimes right relationship is talking it out between two people or in groups. And sometimes, especially if the other isn't engaged, is to let it go. To free ourselves with spiritual intention and often rituals. I think we might do a releasing ritual eventually. However, as the Garth Brooks song goes, his song called Bury the Hatchet, we should not do that with a handle sticking out. That is definitely cheating. So bottom line, liberating love is about freedom. Freedom from what? From things that bind us in unhealthy ways, from attachments that harm us. Freedom from whatever hinders our relationships and our work. In groups, freedom to operate at our fullest potential. Liberating love can impact whole nations too, but it's easier to practice with small stuff and work our ways up. This freedom is earned by the hard work of building relationship and honest communication, and sometimes the acknowledgement that letting go of the string might be the best option. Far from being a warm and fuzzy feeling, liberating love is a love that takes courage, strength, and perseverance. And I think it might be the most important love of all. May each of us remember we have rightful power only over our end of the string. May we have wisdom in every encounter. May we find our way.